Hello, Ch23 students. Trisha Beckham here with Chapter 23 lecture notes. So these are just the principles of persuasive speaking that you'll use to deliver your final speech for this class, which is a persuasive speech. Your topic, again, remember, needs to deal with a question of policy. If you're still unclear with what type of topics are appropriate, you can refer to the end of Chapter 23, and that will give you a little bit of insight into the different types of topics that you can choose. There's a proposition of fact. Just replace proposition with the word question. That's all it's doing there. It means the same thing. So when you have a topic that's a proposition of fact, what you're doing is you're asking the audience to ask a question about facts they already know. If you have a proposition of value, or what we call a question of value speech or topic, what you're doing is you're asking the listener or judge to question a value, question the importance of something. And then the last, a question of policy. It basically advocates a specific action, and that is changing a policy, procedure, or behavior. So that's the last slide on here, but I wanted to make sure that as you prepared your topics for submission through Canvas, that you knew the difference between those three topics before we got started on this particular chapter. Make sure you've got a question of policy topic. So you've got your topic, hopefully. Now let's talk about some of the principles that you're going to apply as you write your speech. First of all, what's persuasion? Persuasion is basically the process of changing or reinforcing attitudes, beliefs, values, and behaviors. And what we have to do is talk about each of these individually so we're really sure we know what they mean, because these can kind of be used interchangeably, especially beliefs and values. Those can get kind of stuck into the same category when they're actually different things. So an attitude is things that you like and things that you dislike. So we're not talking about a teenager who has a bad attitude. That's not at all what we're referring to. We're referring to there's things you like, there's things you dislike. For example, I like, as you all know, exercise. And I dislike, I would say, students who don't put effort forth. I don't like that. I think that it is a huge, tremendous opportunity to be able to go to college. And for students that don't put forth their effort, I just don't like that. Now, if we took that same thing and looked at students and how I feel about students, my attitude is I dislike students that don't try hard. So let's take that idea and go with it into beliefs. So now, what do I believe? What do I understand to be true or false about those students? Well, I believe that it's true. It's a true statement to say that if you work hard, you will succeed. That is a true statement. So I believe that if you work hard, you will get a good grade. You will earn your degree and you will be successful. I believe that. I also believe that going to college ensures success. What I do not believe is that you can still get a job making enough money to support yourself and your family without going to college. I think that's a false statement. I think that is not going to happen, and if anything, you're going to add more stress to your life because you don't have a set path, and so you're going to jump from this job to that job, and then you're going to change careers because you're not making enough and you could make more. So those are the beliefs that I have about educations and student ability. So now you have to look at, okay, well, what are your values based on that particular topic of education and hard work? Well, my values are what is right and what is wrong. I believe that it is wrong to get into a college classroom that you paid money for and not try to get all of the knowledge out of that class that you could possibly gather. And so what is right? It is right to take full advantage of this opportunity and to get as much out of it as possible. There are countries in the world where you cannot go to college. That's not even an option for you. And so for American students especially, there's this idea that I have to go to college. My parents are expecting me to go to college, so I'm going to go, or that's just what people do here. Instead of looking at, it's actually a huge opportunity that we are given very easily in this country, and we should take full advantage of it. So then what are those behaviors? Well, the behaviors that I engage in that would reinforce my values, beliefs, and attitudes are, I have a very high standard as a teacher. And some students look at that and go, what is her problem? Why does she expect this? Or why do I have to be on time? Or why does she make me redo something? Or why does she make me resubmit something after I've already typed it, but there's typos, so she makes it redo it? Because all of my attitudes, beliefs, and values that we just covered reinforce those behaviors, and my behaviors reinforce those attitudes, beliefs, and values. So you have to first understand that about your audience before you can attempt to persuade them. So how does it work? If that's the idea of persuasion, how does it work? Well, there's a couple of different ways. The first one is the elaboration likelihood model. And what the elaboration likelihood model basically said was that when somebody presents ideas to you, you think about that message and you process the information. And then as you hear them elaborate, you evaluate by paying attention to arguments and evidence. And the word evidence is just another way to say support material. And so what happens is, as they hear your support material, they will depend on whether or not they should change their attitudes, beliefs, and values based on the evidence you've presented. So, direct persuasion route tells us when you elaborate and provide solid support material to your audience, they will be persuaded to take whatever action you're asking them to take. The second way that audience members can be persuaded is basically an indirect route, and it's more emotional. And so what you're looking at is not just the logic, reasoning, arguments, and evidence. What you're looking at is the feelings you have about that topic, about that person. There's an emotional reaction you have to the examples that the speaker presents, or maybe you like or dislike the speaker. That is also going to have a huge impact on whether or not you will be persuaded. But those are two different things. Now, if you look at this model and you say, oh, okay, well, that's pretty clear cut. But what this does is gives you a formula for success. And that formula for success is don't just focus on the logic, the reasoning, the arguments, and the evidence. Because if you do that and you forget that your audience has feelings and emotions that you can control to a certain extent. Some people would say, well, that's manipulation. I wouldn't use those words. I think it's using the knowledge that elaboration likelihood model presents, and that is we all have feelings, and our feelings affect how we behave, our beliefs, attitudes, and values. And if we hear real solid arguments and sound evidence, and our feelings are also controlled to a certain extent, or we feel sad for something, or we feel glad for something, or we see this desire to change a problem that is serious and severe, now you've taken elaboration likelihood model and you've used it to help you be more effective in persuading your audience. And that's what you should do, and that's what you should remember about this model. Don't just focus on the evidence, focus on feeling and emotion as well. The next thing is there's Aristotle's theory of persuasion. and I'm sure most of you have heard about this. He was an ancient Greek philosopher, or his specialty was rhetoric, actually, which is just the language in which we talk about things, how we process information, how we learn. But his specific area was in persuasion. So his theory said that there was 3 areas. The first was logos. So persuasion had to have logos, a logos component. And that component involved the evidence and the reasoning. And what reasoning is just how you connect pieces of evidence in a way that will lead your audience to the conclusion you want them to accept. The next area or component of Aristotle's theory is ethos, and that was credibility. He basically proposed that unless the audience finds you credible, unless you clearly state why you're credible, persuasion would be more difficult. And the last component of the theory of persuasion was pathos, which is emotion. So really, this is similar to elaboration likelihood model. Elaboration likelihood didn't account for credibility. It really just focused on the evidence and the emotion, right? But Aristotle said, well, but if you're not credible, there's no way that you can persuade somebody. In fact, if you, in fact, didn't tell them why you were credible, you would miss out on an opportunity. You should also have common sense, and you should be concerned for the well-being of the audience. Those things definitely would play a part in the theory of persuasion. When you feel like somebody does not have your best interests in mind and they're trying to persuade you, usually that's when we will call it manipulation. We will identify it as manipulation and we will not go along with them because they don't really care about us. What they care about is making money. And you see that a lot when you're watching commercials during TV shows and that sort of thing. You'll think, this person doesn't care a thing about me. They just want me to buy something so that they can make money. All right, so now that you know how persuasion works, how do you exactly motivate listeners? What can I do? I understand how it works, but what specific things